The sun was just rising when Lena walked up the long driveway of the Hayes mansion. Holding her small bag close to her chest, her heart was beating fast. She had never worked in a place so big before. The mansion looked like something out of a dream, with shining windows, tall gates, and a garden full of flowers she had only seen in magazines. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself that this was just another job. But deep inside she knew it felt different. Lena had come from a small town. She had lost her parents when she was young and had learned to take care of herself early. She had worked in many houses before, always quiet, always doing her best. She didn't talk much, but her gentle smile and kind eyes always made people trust her. When she was hired to work as a maid for Mr. Richard Hayes, a billionaire businessman, she promised herself she would do her best. She didn't know much about him except that he was very rich, very busy, and had twin sons, Ethan and Evan, who were 7 years old. When she entered the grand hallway, she felt small. The floors shone like mirrors, and everything smelled of expensive polish and silence. A butler named Mr. Grant greeted her and showed her around. He spoke politely but without warmth, telling her the rules of the mansion. She must not enter Mr. Hayes's office. She must keep noise to a minimum, and she must never disturb the children while they were studying. Lena nodded to everything, quietly memorizing each rule. Her small room was at the back of the mansion, near the laundry area. It had a little window that looked out into the garden. That night, after unpacking her few clothes, she sat by the window and looked at the stars. She thought about her life, about how far she had come. She didn't have much, but she had her honesty, her hard work, and her love for music. She missed playing the piano. It had been years since she touched one, but sometimes she still hummed the melodies she remembered from her childhood. The next morning, Lena woke up early. The mansion was quiet except for the ticking of a distant clock. She started her work, cleaning the kitchen and the hallways, dusting the grand furniture and arranging fresh flowers. While she worked, she softly hummed to herself. The tune was gentle, like a lullaby. She didn't notice that someone was listening upstairs. 2 little boys were peeking down the staircase. Ethan and Evan, the twins, watched her curiously. They were used to seeing people come and go in their big house, but this new maid seemed different. She wasn't afraid of the silence, and she smiled at the flowers as if they were friends. "She's singing," whispered Evan. "I think she's nice," said Ethan. They giggled and ran back to their room before anyone saw them. Later that day, while Lena was cleaning the study room, she found something that made her heart skip a beat. In the corner, under a white sheet, stood a grand piano. It was covered with dust, forgotten, but even like that, it looked beautiful. She walked closer and gently touched the keys. A faint memory flashed in her mind, her mother teaching her to play when she was little. She smiled sadly and whispered, "Hello, old friend." Then she quickly covered it again and went back to work. She didn't know that piano once belonged to Mr. Hayes's late wife. When evening came, Mr. Hayes returned home. He was tall, serious, and always busy on his phone. He barely looked at the staff, only giving short orders. The twins ran to greet him, but even they could tell their father's mind was somewhere else. He kissed their heads quickly and went straight to his office. Lena watched quietly from the corner and felt a wave of sadness for the 2 boys. After dinner, when everyone had gone to bed, Lena couldn't sleep. The house was silent, and the moonlight fell across the grand hallway. She walked quietly to the study. Drawn by something she couldn't explain, she uncovered the piano again and sat down. Her fingers hesitated, then pressed a few keys. The sound echoed softly in the empty room. She closed her eyes and began to play. The melody was slow and tender, filled with emotion she had kept inside for years. It told stories of loss, of dreams forgotten, of hope that never fully died. Her eyes glistened, and her hands moved as if guided by memory. The sound filled the mansion like a whisper from another time. Upstairs, one of the twins, Ethan, woke up. He rubbed his eyes and followed the sound down the stairs. He hid behind the door and watched Lena play. The moonlight fell on her face, and her expression was peaceful. For the first time, Ethan felt something strange, a warmth that the house had not felt since his mother died. He stood there quietly until the song ended. Then he tiptoed back to bed, his heart full of wonder. Lena finished playing and sat still for a moment. She didn't know anyone had heard her for the first time in a long while. She felt alive again. She smiled softly and whispered, "Good night," before covering the piano once more. The next morning, the twins greeted her differently. They smiled wider and asked questions. They followed her around, helping her carry things. They didn't say it. But they liked her, and slowly, the big quiet mansion began to feel a little warmer. Lena didn't know it yet, but her music had already started to change the lives around her. In a house where hearts had gone silent, her gentle melody had woken something forgotten, something beautiful, something about to begin. That night, after everyone went to sleep, the mansion was wrapped in silence. Only the sound of the wind brushing the tall windows could be heard. The moonlight slipped through the curtains, touching the old piano in the corner of the study like a silver ribbon. Lena stood by the door holding her breath. She knew she shouldn't be there, but something deep inside her pulled her closer. She had spent the whole day working, cleaning rooms bigger than her entire house, washing dishes that looked too expensive to touch. But through it all, she couldn't stop thinking about that piano. It was as if it was calling her name, reminding her of something she had lost long ago when she was little. Her mother used to play an old upright piano in their small home. Every night before bed, she would teach Lena to play simple songs. They never had much, but music made their tiny house feel like heaven. After her mother passed away, Lena never played again. Life became about survival, not dreams. She looked around the empty study, then quietly lifted the cover off the piano. A thin layer of dust floated into the air. She smiled softly and ran her fingers over the keys. The cold ivory felt strange under her touch. Like shaking hands with an old friend after years apart, she pressed one key. A soft note echoed, then another and another. Soon, her hands began to move naturally, finding melodies she hadn't played in years. The tune that filled the air was gentle and full of emotion. It spoke of missing someone, of remembering a love that never fades. Lena closed her eyes, lost in the moment. The mansion that always felt empty suddenly felt alive again. The music flowed like light, wrapping around the walls and whispering through the halls. Upstairs, Ethan stirred in his bed. His brother Evan was fast asleep, but he could hear something. It wasn't the sound of the TV or the wind. It was music, soft, beautiful, and sad. He sat up and listened. His little heart felt warm. He tiptoed out of bed and followed the sound. His small feet made no noise on the stairs. He hid behind the big wooden door of the study and peeked in. He saw Lena sitting at the piano, her eyes half closed, her fingers dancing across the keys like magic. The moonlight touched her face, and for a moment, she looked like someone out of a storybook. Ethan didn't move, he just watched, completely amazed. He had never seen anyone play like that before. Not even his mother. He felt something in his chest, something he didn't have words for. It was like happiness and sadness mixed together. When the song ended, Lena sighed softly, wiping a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. She stood up quietly and covered the piano again, then turned off the lights and left. Ethan hurried back to bed, but he couldn't sleep. The sound of the piano kept replaying in his head. The next morning, Ethan looked at his brother and said, "Evan, I saw her." "Saw who?" Evan asked, half asleep. "The maid, Lena. She was playing the piano last night," Ethan whispered excitedly. "She plays like an angel." Evan frowned. "Maid can play piano?" he asked. Ethan nodded. "Yes, and it was so beautiful." Evan didn't believe him at first, but Ethan's face was glowing with excitement. And that made him curious. Later that day, when Lena was cleaning the living room, the twins followed her quietly. They didn't say anything for a while, just watched her. Finally, Ethan asked, "Lena, do you know how to play piano?" She froze for a moment, then smiled gently. "A little," she said softly. "How do you know?" Ethan grinned. "Because I saw you last night." Lena's eyes widened. "You were awake?" she asked, embarrassed. Ethan nodded proudly. "You play very nice," Evan added, shy but sincere. Lena's heart melted. No one had ever complimented her music in years. She smiled at the boys. "Thank you, but don't tell anyone, okay?" she whispered, putting a finger to her lips. "It's our little secret." The twins nodded eagerly, feeling like they had just been trusted with something very special. From that day, everything changed a little. Whenever Lena worked in the house, the twins would follow her around, asking questions, helping her carry things, or just sitting nearby listening to her hum. Sometimes they would ask her to hum the tune she played that night, and she would smile and do it softly while dusting or folding laundry. The boys felt safe around her, something they hadn't felt in a long time. One afternoon when the house was quiet, Ethan and Evan sneaked into the study. They uncovered the piano and stared at it in awe. "Should we try?" Ethan asked. "We don't know how," Evan said nervously. "But we can learn," Ethan replied. Pressing one key, it made a small sound, and both of them laughed. Just then, Lena walked in and gasped softly. "What are you two doing here?" she asked, but there was no anger in her voice. The boys looked at each other, guilty. "We wanted to see the piano," Evan said. "Can you teach us?" Ethan added hopefully. Lena looked at their innocent faces and couldn't say no. She sat down and gently guided their tiny fingers on the keys. "Like this," she said. "Each key is like a word. Together they make a story." The boys listened carefully, laughing when they made mistakes for the first time. The grand piano, silent for years, was filled with laughter and learning from the kitchen. One of the older maids saw them through the doorway and smiled. She whispered to another maid, "Look at that. The twins are laughing again." That night, when Mr. Hayes came home, the twins ran to him excitedly. "Daddy, Lena can play piano," they said together. He frowned, slightly surprised. "Really?" he asked. "She played for us and she's teaching us too," Ethan said proudly. Mr. Hayes didn't say anything. He just nodded and went upstairs. But something about their happiness stayed in his mind. Later, as Lena cleaned the study again, she looked at the piano and smiled. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere. In a house full of money but starved of warmth, her music had started to bring life back. Note by note, heart by heart, and without knowing it, she had begun to heal more than just herself. The morning sun filled the mansion with golden light, and laughter echoed softly down the grand staircase. Ethan and Evan were chasing each other around the hall, their voices bright and full of joy. Lena watched them from the corner as she polished a vase. She smiled. It had been weeks since she started working there, and the twins had become her little shadows. Wherever she went, they followed, asking questions, helping her, and sometimes just sitting nearby as she worked. Mr. Hayes noticed the change too. His sons, who had been quiet and distant after their mother's death, were now smiling again. He didn't say much, but deep inside he was grateful. He didn't know that the reason behind their happiness was the quiet maid who hummed songs while folding laundry and played the piano when no one was watching. One Thursday morning, as the twins sat at breakfast, they looked at each other and giggled. "Lena," Ethan said suddenly, "can you take us to the mall today?" Lena froze. "The mall?" she asked, confused. "Yes," Evan added quickly. "Daddy's busy again. And we're bored, please, just for a little while." Lena hesitated. She knew it wasn't part of her job to take the children out, and she didn't have permission. "I don't think I should," she said softly. "Your father might not like it." The twins looked disappointed. Ethan folded his arms. "He's always busy," he muttered. "He won't even notice," Evan nodded. "We'll be good, we promise," Lena sighed. Torn between rules and the boys' hopeful faces, she had seen how lonely they were, always playing indoors, always watched by maids and guards. They needed to see the world outside. To laugh like normal children after a long pause, she whispered, "All right, but only for a short time. And you must behave." The boys jumped up in excitement. "Thank you, Lena," they shouted, hugging her legs. She couldn't help but laugh. It was the first time anyone had hugged her in years. By noon they were ready. The driver had the day off, so Lena decided to take them by taxi. She dressed them neatly, put on her simple blue dress and tied her hair back. She packed snacks and water bottles into a small bag. As they stepped outside, the guard at the gate looked surprised. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Just a short walk," Lena replied calmly. Hiding her nervousness, the guard didn't question her further. Assuming she had permission, the city was bright and alive. The boys pressed their faces against the taxi window, pointing at shops, cars, and people. "Look, Lena, balloons," Ethan said, "and ice cream," Evan added. Lena smiled, watching their wonder like a mother seeing her children smile for the first time. When they reached the mall, the twins were amazed. Everything sparkled, the lights, the floors, the colorful displays. "Can we look around?" Ethan asked. Lena nodded. "But stay close," she warned. Holding their hands tightly, they went from toy shops to candy stores. Laughing and playing, Lena felt happy just watching them. For a while, she forgot she was just a maid. She felt like she belonged with them, like family. After an hour, they stopped near the food court to rest. The boys were eating ice cream when a soft sound caught Lena's attention. She turned her head and saw a piano placed near the center of the mall. It was a white grand piano. Shining under bright lights, a small sign beside it read, "Play me, for everyone to enjoy." Ethan noticed her gaze and smiled mischievously. "Lena, go play," he said. "Oh no." "No," she laughed nervously. "Not here. Please," Evan begged. "You play so nice, please, just one song." People were walking by. Children running, couples laughing. No one knew who she was, no one cared still. Her heart pounded in her chest. "I can't," she whispered. "You're the best pianist ever." Ethan interrupted, grabbing her hand. "Please. Just one." She looked at their pleading faces and sighed. "All right, one song, then we go home." The boys cheered. Lena walked toward the piano slowly. Her heart raced as she sat down. Her fingers trembled over the keys. A few people nearby noticed her but kept walking. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath for a moment. She was no longer a maid. She was the girl who loved music, the girl her mother had once been proud of. Then she began to play. The sound that came out was pure magic. Soft at first, then stronger. It floated through the air like a whisper turning into a storm. The melody was full of emotion, joy, pain, love, loss, all mixed into one beautiful story told without words. People started to stop one by one, turning to see who was playing. Within minutes, a small crowd gathered. Some took out their phones to record. Others just stood still, mesmerized. The twins stood proudly near her, their eyes shining. They couldn't believe so many people were watching Lena. She wasn't shy anymore, she was glowing. Her fingers moved with grace and passion. The mall, usually filled with noise, fell silent. A little girl in the crowd whispered, "She's amazing," and her mother nodded, smiling. "She plays like she's telling a secret." When Lena finished, there was a moment of quiet. Then, applause erupted. Dozens of people clapped. Some even cheered. Lena opened her eyes, surprised. Her face turned red. She quickly stood up, bowing politely. She grabbed the twins' hands and said softly, "Come on, let's go." The boys laughed. Proud and happy, Lena, everyone loved it. Ethan said, "You're famous now." Evan giggled. Lena laughed shyly. "No, I'm not," she said. "I just played a song." But as they walked away, she didn't notice a man in the crowd still holding up his phone. Recording her performance, he smiled and said, "This will go viral." That night, back in the mansion, the twins couldn't stop talking about it. She played so beautifully. They told everyone, people clapped. But Lena stayed quiet, a soft smile on her lips. She didn't know that her life was about to change, because by morning, the world would know the name of the maid who played the piano at the mall and made strangers cry. The video spread like wildfire overnight. It started with one person posting it on social media with the caption, "A maid playing like an angel in the middle of the mall." Within hours, it was shared thousands of times. People couldn't stop talking about it. The emotion in her music, the innocence in her face, and the two smiling twin boys standing proudly beside her. But Lena didn't know any of this. She woke up early the next morning like every other day. The mansion was quiet. The air smelled of polished wood and coffee. She tied her hair neatly, wore her simple uniform, and started her work. Her hands moved fast as usual, but her heart was still dancing with the music she played yesterday. In the kitchen, Ethan and Evan were already up, eating breakfast and whispering excitedly. "Do you think people liked her playing?" Ethan asked. "Of course." Evan said. Everyone clapped. "We should tell Daddy," Ethan said. No, he'll get mad we went to the mall," Evan warned. The two looked at each other and giggled, keeping the secret between them that morning. When Lena passed by the living room, she heard the twins giggling. She smiled softly. "You two seem very happy today," she said. "We're just talking about the mall," Ethan replied quickly, trying not to give anything away. Lena nodded. "It was a fun day," she said warmly. By noon, something strange started happening. The phone in the mansion's office kept ringing, and the staff whispered among themselves, "Did you see it?" One of the maids asked the gardener. "The video." "What video?" he asked. "The maid." "The new one, Lena. She's all over the internet." Lena was polishing the staircase when Mr. Grant, the butler, approached her with a puzzled expression. "Miss Lena, I need to speak with you," he said in his usual cold tone. Lena froze. "Yes, sir?" "Did you go to the mall yesterday?" he asked. She hesitated. "Yes, sir, the twins wanted to go out, I thought." "And did you play the piano?" he interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Her cheeks turned red. I did just one song," she whispered. Mr. Grant sighed and handed her a tablet. "Then I suggest you see this," he said. On the screen was a video, her video. Lena watched in shock as she saw herself playing the piano, surrounded by a crowd. Her fingers moved gracefully, her eyes closed. Her soul shining through the music. She didn't even look like herself. The comments below the video read, "This woman plays with her heart. She should be on a stage." I cried listening to her. Her hands shook. "Who posted this?" She asked. "It doesn't matter," the butler said. "What matters is that Mr. Hayes has seen it." Lena's heart dropped. "He saw it?" "Yes," he replied. "And he wishes to speak to you immediately." She walked to Mr. Hayes's office. Her legs trembling, the heavy door was half open. She could see him standing by the window, phone in hand, when she stepped inside. He turned, his face serious. "Lena," he said slowly. "Sit down." She obeyed quietly. "I saw the video," he said after a long pause. "The whole world has seen it, apparently." His tone was calm but firm. "Why were my sons at the mall without my permission?" Lena looked down, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, sir, they wanted to go out and I thought—" "You thought?" He cut her off. "You're here to work, not to take my children wherever you please." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't mean any harm, sir," she whispered. "I only wanted them to smile. They look so lonely." His expression softened for a brief second but hardened again. "And the piano?" he asked. "Where did you learn to play like that?" She hesitated, then answered honestly. "I used to study music before life changed, sir." He stared at her silently. There was something in his eyes. Not anger now, but curiosity, maybe even admiration. "You play beautifully," he said quietly. "But next time, tell me before taking my children anywhere." Lena nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, I'm sorry." He dismissed her with a nod. That will be all. She left the office, her heart heavy, but part of her felt relieved. At least he didn't fire her later that evening. While Mr. Hayes sat in his study, his phone buzzed again. It was another message, this time from a music company executive. "Is the woman in this video working for you?" The message read, "We'd like to meet her." Mr. Hayes frowned. Scrolling through the endless comments praising Lena's performance, something inside him stirred. For years, his mansion had been quiet, lifeless ever since his wife died, but now, music had returned. Meanwhile, in the twins' bedroom, Ethan and Evan were still talking about the mall. "Daddy didn't get too mad, right?" Ethan asked. "He didn't even yell." Evan grinned. Maybe he liked her playing too. "Do you think she'll play again?" "I hope so," Evan said. It made everything feel happy again. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She sat by her small window, looking out at the garden under the moonlight. Her heart was full of mixed feelings, fear, joy, surprise, and a strange warmth she couldn't name. She thought about the applause, the smiles, the way people listened. For the first time in years, she had felt seen. She whispered softly, "Maybe music isn't gone from my life after all." Downstairs, in his quiet study, Mr. Hayes poured himself a glass of wine and watched the video again. The sound of her piano filled the room. Soft and full of emotion, he leaned back and closed his eyes, remembering his late wife who used to play the same instrument before she passed away. For the first time in years, he didn't feel angry. He felt peace. He didn't know it yet, but the music that once belonged to his wife had found its way back into his home, through the hands of the quiet maid who played like an angel, and the two little boys who had unknowingly brought her into their lives and somewhere in the city. People were still watching the video, sharing it, and wondering who the mysterious woman was. The world was falling in love with the melody that came from a heart that had once stopped believing in dreams, but had finally found the courage to play again. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of the Hayes mansion, casting soft golden light across the marble floor. The world outside was buzzing with news about the mysterious pianist from the mall. But inside, Lena continued her chores quietly. Pretending everything was normal, she had no idea that her life was about to change again. This time, in a way she never imagined. In the kitchen, the staff whispered in low voices. "That's her," one of the maids murmured. "The maid who played in the mall. I saw the video. My daughter showed me," another said. "It's got millions of views now." "Millions?" the cook gasped. "And she's working here like nothing happened." Lena entered just then. Carrying folded napkins, the room went silent. She smiled politely. unaware of what they were talking about. But she could feel their curious eyes following her as she left. Meanwhile, in his office, Mr. Hayes sat behind his desk. Scrolling through his phone, every news outlet was sharing the same clip. Unknown Maid's piano performance brings Mal to tears. The video had been viewed more than 5 million times overnight. There were articles calling her the Angel of Melody, and comments flooding in from people all over the world. Some said her playing reminded them of love. Others said it made them cry. Richard Hayes wasn't a man easily moved. But when he watched the video again, something inside him stirred. The melody she played had touched a part of him that he had buried long ago. The part that still missed his wife. The part that longed to feel something real again. Just then, his assistant walked in. "Sir, there are reporters outside the gate," he said. "They're asking if the pianist in the video works here." Richard frowned. "Tell security not to let anyone in," he said sharply. He didn't want chaos in his home, especially not around his children. Upstairs, Ethan and Evan were in their room, watching the same video on a tablet. Giggling with excitement, "Lena's famous." Ethan shouted, "Look! Everyone loves her." Evan nodded. "She's like a movie star now. We should tell her." Ethan said, jumping off the bed, "Let's go." They ran down the hall and found Lena dusting the piano room. "Lena! Lena!" they yelled. "You're on the internet!" Lena blinked, confused. "What?" "Your video! The one from the mall." Ethan said, "Everyone's watching it." Evan held up the tablet, showing her. Lena froze as she saw herself again. The same video, but now with thousands of likes. Hearts and comments. Her heart raced. "Oh no," she whispered. "This is not good." The twins frowned. "Why not?" "Everyone loves you." Lena smiled weakly. "That's very kind, but I don't think your father will like all this attention." "He already saw it," Ethan said. "But he didn't yell," Evan added proudly. "He just looked serious." Before Lena could say anything, the butler appeared at the door. "Miss Lena," he said, "Mr. Hayes wishes to see you in the music room." Her stomach dropped. "The music room?" She repeated. "Yes," the butler said. "Right away." She walked there nervously, her steps echoing on the marble floor when she entered. Mr. Hayes was standing by the piano, the same one that had been silent for years. The twins sat quietly on the sofa, their faces full of curiosity. Richard looked at Lena and gestured toward the piano. "Play," he said simply. Lena blinked in surprise. "Sir?" "Play," he repeated softly. "The same song." She hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. "Sir, please," he interrupted, his voice calm but firm, slowly. She sat down and touched the keys. The sound filled the room. Gentle, pure, alive. It wasn't just notes, it was emotion. The same melody that once echoed in the mall now filled the mansion with warmth. The twins smiled, swaying to the rhythm. Richard closed his eyes, letting the music wash over him. When she finished, silence hung in the air. Richard looked at her for a long moment, his eyes soft but unreadable. "You play like my late wife," he said finally. His voice was low, filled with memories. Lena's eyes widened slightly. "I didn't know, sir," she whispered. "That piano was hers," he said. "No one has touched it since she passed. Until you did." Her heart ached for him. She could see the pain behind his calm face. "I'm sorry," she said. "I shouldn't have." "No," he interrupted. "Don't be. The house hasn't felt alive in years." "Not until now." The twins looked at their father in surprise. They had never heard him speak like that for the first time. He didn't sound like the strict businessman everyone feared. He sounded human. Richard looked at Lena again. "You've given my sons joy, and you reminded me of something I'd forgotten," he said. "Thank you." Lena bowed her head. "It was never my intention to cause trouble." "Sir," she said. "You didn't," he replied. "But the world seems interested in your music. I've already had people contact me asking who you are." Her eyes widened. "People contacted you?" she asked. "Yes," he nodded. "Music schools, journalists, even a few talent scouts. But I don't want fame," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I just wanted to play again." Richard smiled faintly. "Sometimes life chooses for us," he said. "Maybe it's giving you back what you lost that evening." The twins wouldn't stop talking about her music. "Lena, are you going to be on TV?" Evan asked excitedly. No, she laughed. "I'll stay right here but you deserve it." Ethan said, "Everyone should hear you play." She smiled, touched by their innocence. "Maybe one day," she whispered when the house grew quiet. Richard sat alone in the music room staring at the piano. He could still hear Lena's melody echoing in his mind. It wasn't just music, and it was healing. It had awakened something in him, something he thought had died with his wife outside. The moonlight spilled through the windows, touching the piano keys, and for the first time in years, the Hayes mansion felt like a home again. There was laughter upstairs, music in the air and warmth in the halls, and somewhere deep in Lena's heart, a forgotten dream had begun to breathe again. She didn't know where this path would lead, but she knew one thing. Music had found her once more, and this time it wasn't going to let her go. The morning began with silence, but it wasn't the heavy silence that used to haunt the Hayes mansion. This one was soft, calm, almost peaceful. The golden rays of the sun filtered through the tall windows, glinting off the grand piano in the study, the same piano that had become the center of something extraordinary. Lena stood in the kitchen, helping the cook prepare breakfast. The smell of toast and fresh coffee filled the air. She moved quietly as always, but inside, her heart was restless. The events of the last few days had changed everything. The mall, the video, the applause. They kept replaying in her mind like a dream she still didn't believe was real. Upstairs, Ethan and Evan were already awake. Their laughter echoed down the hall as they argued over who could play Lena's song better on the small toy piano in their room. "You're doing it wrong." Ethan said, "No, I'm not." Evan argued, "It's this key." The sound made Lena smile. She never thought her music would reach anyone, let alone two little hearts that needed light. Suddenly, the butler appeared in the doorway. "Miss Lena," he said in his usual serious tone. "Mr. Hayes would like to see you in his office." Lena froze, wiping her hands nervously. "Right now?" "Yes," he said, immediately. As she walked toward the office, her mind raced. She had no idea why he wanted to see her again. Maybe the media had caused more trouble, or maybe he was upset about something new. She stopped at the large wooden door and took a deep breath before knocking softly. "Come in," his voice called. Inside, Richard Hayes sat behind his desk, but this time he wasn't alone. Across from him sat a man in a dark suit and glasses. Holding a folder, they both looked up as Lena entered. "Lena," Richard said gently, "this is Mr. Collins, a representative from the Royal Music Foundation." Lena blinked, confused. "Royal Music Foundation?" Mr. Collins smiled politely. "Miss Lena, it's a pleasure to meet you. I saw your performance, the one that's been shared across the internet. It was remarkable." Lena's hands tightened nervously. "Oh, that... It was nothing, sir, just a simple song." "It was more than that," he said. "Your music has touched people everywhere. Our foundation would like to offer you a scholarship to continue your studies at our conservatory." Her heart stopped for a moment. "Study? At a conservatory?" she repeated softly. "Yes," he said. "We believe you have a rare gift, and it deserves to grow." Richard leaned back in his chair. Watching her reaction closely, he had already heard the offer earlier that morning, and though part of him didn't want to lose her from the mansion, another part of him wanted her to see how far she could go. "It's a full scholarship," he said calmly. "Everything covered, lessons, housing, instruments." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "Sir, I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Mr. Collins said warmly. "This is a chance that comes once in a lifetime." She looked at Richard, unsure. "But sir, what about the twins? What about my work here?" Richard smiled faintly. "You've done more for my sons than any teacher or nanny ever could. They'll miss you, but they'll understand, and so will I." Her heart ached at his words. "I don't deserve this," she said softly. "I'm just a maid." Richard stood and looked her in the eyes. "You're not just anything, Lena. You're someone who reminded us all what it means to feel alive again." Tears rolled down her cheeks. She couldn't remember the last time anyone spoke to her that way. "Thank you," she whispered. I'll think about it." Later that evening, the mansion felt strangely quiet again. Lena sat in her small room, the scholarship letter on her lap. Her mind was a storm. She wanted to say yes, to chase the dream she thought had died, but another part of her couldn't imagine leaving the twins, or this house that had somehow become her home. Just then there was a knock on her door. "Come in," she said softly. The twins peeked in, smiling. "Lena," Evan said, "Daddy told us you might go to music school. Is it true?" Ethan asked quickly, "Will you be famous?" Lena smiled sadly. It's true, but I don't know yet. You have to go. Ethan said, "You're amazing." But who will play piano with us? Evan asked, his voice small. Lena's heart melted. She knelt beside them. Even if I go, I'll visit, she promised. And you'll keep playing, won't you? Yes, they said together. Then my music will still be here, she said, touching their hearts. The next morning, Richard found her in the garden, sitting by the fountain. Have you decided? He asked quietly. She nodded slowly. Yes. Sir, she said, I'll accept, he smiled. But there was a faint sadness in his eyes. Good, he said. You deserve it. Thank you for everything, she whispered. For believing in me. Before she could say more, he stopped her. No, Lena, thank you, he said softly. You brought music back into this house and maybe a little life back into me. They stood there for a moment in silence, the sound of the fountain blending with the morning breeze. That evening, the twins begged for one last song before bed. Please, Lena, one more, Ethan said. Play the one from the mall, Evan added. She smiled and sat at the grand piano once more. Her fingers touched the keys, and the melody flowed, gentle, tender, filled with love. The boys sat close together, eyes sleepy but smiling. Richard stood in the doorway, watching quietly. The music wrapped around them like a warm blanket, filling the house with light and emotion. As the final notes faded, Lena looked up and met Richard's eyes for a brief moment. There was silence, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was full, like the space between heartbeats, full of something unspoken but real. That night, when Lena closed her eyes, she wasn't just a maid anymore, she was a dream reborn, a melody that had found its voice again. And somewhere deep down, Richard Hayes knew that the music that had once left his life had returned, not just through sound, but through the woman who had quietly changed everything. Rain fell softly outside the Hayes mansion, tapping gently against the tall glass windows. The world seemed quieter that morning, as if holding its breath. Lena stood by the window of her small room, staring at the gray sky. Her bags were half-packed on the bed, neatly folded clothes, a few personal things, and tucked between them. The scholarship letter that had changed everything. Today was her last day at the mansion. Her heart felt heavy. The thought of leaving the twins made her chest ache. They had become her sunshine, her laughter, her reason to smile, and Richard Hayes, the man who once barely looked at her now, felt like someone she had known forever. She didn't want to admit it, but somewhere deep inside, she had grown to care for him downstairs. The twins were sitting at the dining table, both unusually quiet. She's really going, Evan whispered. Daddy said she has to, Ethan replied softly. But why can't she stay and play piano here? Because she has to chase her dream. Richard's calm voice came from behind them. The boys turned to see him standing there, holding a cup of coffee. His face looked calm, but his eyes betrayed something else, something sad. Lena walked in a moment later, her uniform crisp, her hair tied neatly, but there was a softness in her eyes that gave her away. Good morning, she said quietly. The twins ran to her and hugged her tightly. Don't go, Evan mumbled. Please stay, Ethan whispered. She knelt down, holding them close. If I stay, I'll only be your maid, she said softly. But if I go, maybe one day you'll see me on a big stage, playing just for you. The twins sniffled, trying to smile. Promise. Ethan asked. Promise, she said. Touching her heart, Richard watched the scene silently. The way Lena comforted his sons, the way she smiled through her pain. It stirred something deep inside him, something he thought he'd never feel again after his wife's death. Later that afternoon, Richard called Lena to his study. The grand piano stood near the window, polished and shining, just like the day she first played it. Sit, he said, gesturing toward the piano bench. She hesitated. Sir? Please, he said softly. She sat down, her fingers resting lightly on the keys. Play something before you go, he said. Anything you like. Lena took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to play. The melody was new, slow, emotional, filled with quiet strength. It wasn't a song of sadness, but of gratitude. Of endings and beginnings, her fingers moved gracefully. Telling a story her lips couldn't, Richard stood by the window. Watching her, the music filled the room, soft and warm. He saw her not as the maid he hired months ago, but as a woman who had brought his home and his heart back to life. When the final note faded, silence filled the room again. Lena looked up, her eyes glistening. It's called Goodbye for Now, she said quietly. I wrote it last night, Richard nodded slowly. It's beautiful, he said. Just like the person who played it. Her breath caught for a second. But before she could say anything, he continued. Lena, before you leave, I want to know something. Yes, sir? Why did you stop playing before? Lena hesitated, her gaze falling to the piano keys. After my parents died, I had no money. I had to drop out of music school. I sold my piano to pay rent. And I took whatever work I could find. Her voice trembled. Every time I saw a piano, it hurt because it reminded me of what I lost. Richard's expression softened. You didn't lose it, he said gently. You just put it away for a while. She smiled faintly. Maybe. He took a step closer, his voice lower now. You've reminded me of something too, Lena. What's that, sir? That music isn't just sound, it's memory, it's love, it's life. His eyes met hers, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the rain had stopped. A beam of sunlight broke through the clouds, lighting the piano in gold. That evening, the staff gathered by the gate to say goodbye. The twins stood holding handmade cards that said, We love you, Lena. In messy crayon letters, Don't forget us, Ethan said, trying not to cry. Never, she said, hugging them both tightly. You two are my little stars. Richard walked her to the car waiting by the driveway. The foundation representative will meet you at the train station, he said quietly. Thank you, sir, for everything, she said. He looked at her, his voice soft. Don't thank me, Lena, you earned this, she smiled, her eyes shining with tears. I'll come back someday. I promise, it will be waiting, he said. As the car drove away, Richard stood there, hands in his pockets, watching until it disappeared down the long road. The twins ran out, waving frantically. Bye, Lena, they shouted. The wind carried her voice back faintly. Goodbye, my boys. Days turned into weeks. The mansion felt quieter without her, but not empty because her music still lived there. The twins practiced the piano every evening, trying to play her songs. Sometimes they got the notes wrong, but they laughed and kept trying. And sometimes, late at night, Richard would find himself sitting by the piano, running his fingers across the keys, remembering her melody, remembering her smile, meanwhile far away. In a small dorm room at the conservatory, Lena sat at a new piano, practicing until her fingers ached. Every note carried a memory, the laughter of two little boys, the kind eyes of a man who believed in her, and a mansion that once felt cold but had become a home. As she played, she whispered softly, This is for you, and the music rose like a promise kept. Gentle and eternal, the maid who once played in secret was now a student again, her dream reborn, her heart full of hope. And though miles away, she could still feel the echo of the Hayes mansion's warmth, the place where her new story had begun. A soft breeze carried the sound of distant laughter through the open windows of the Royal Music Conservatory. It had been 6 months since Lena left the Hayes mansion, and her life had transformed in ways she never thought possible. Every day began with the echo of piano notes and ended with applause from her classmates and teachers. The same fingers that once scrubbed floors now danced across the grand piano in front of hundreds. But even with all the success, her heart sometimes wandered back to the mansion, to two little boys who used to giggle beside her, and to a man who used to stand quietly by the window, listening without a word. On that particular morning, Lena sat on stage during a rehearsal for the conservatory's winter concert. Her teacher, Maestro Julian, watched her from the front row. Your technique is perfect, he said. But your music needs something more, feeling. Play from the place that hurts and heals at the same time. Lena nodded. She knew exactly what that place was. That night, after the hall emptied, she stayed behind, alone with the piano. The lights were dim, and the air smelled faintly of dust and roses. She sat down and began to play, not the song she had been assigned, but her own composition, the one she had written on her last night at the Hayes mansion. Goodbye for Now. The melody filled the empty hall. Soft and haunting, her heart poured into every note. Images flashed in her mind. Ethan's mischievous grin, Evan's sleepy eyes, Richard's calm voice saying, You didn't lose your music, you just put it away. Unbeknownst to her, someone was standing near the back door of the hall. Watching quietly, Richard Hayes had come. He had promised himself he would visit someday. And when he received the conservatory's invitation to attend the student recital, He knew he had to go. The twins had insisted too. "You have to go, Daddy," Ethan said, "and record everything." Evan added now. Standing there in the shadows, Richard listened. His heart clenched at the sound. It was the same melody that had once filled his mansion with warmth, but now it was deeper, richer, more alive. When the final note faded, Lena sighed softly. She turned to him and froze. "Mr. Hayes?" she whispered, unable to believe her eyes. He smiled. "You still play beautifully," he said, walking closer. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You came all this way?" she asked, her voice trembling with surprise. "Yes," he said. "The twins wanted me to bring something to you." He handed her a small envelope. Inside were 2 drawings, one of her playing the piano and another of all 4 of them together. Smiling in the corner, written in crooked handwriting, were the words, "We miss you, Lena." Her eyes filled with tears. "They remembered," she whispered. "They never forgot," Richard said softly. "Every night they play your song. Even when it sounds a little wrong." They both laughed quietly. The sound light and genuine for a moment. The hall was silent again except for their breathing and the faint hum of the piano strings. "You look different," Richard said after a while. "Happier," Lena smiled shyly. "I am, sir," she said. "I finally feel like I'm doing what I was meant to do." He nodded. "I knew you would." There was a pause. Heavy but warm. The kind that carries things unsaid. "Do you ever miss the mansion?" he asked. "Every day," she said honestly. "It wasn't just a place to work, it was home." Richard looked down, his voice quiet. "It hasn't felt the same since you left." Before Lena could respond, Maestro Julian walked in. "Ah, Mr. Hayes, you made it," he said cheerfully. "We were just about to close for the night, Lena. Are you ready for tomorrow's concert?" She nodded quickly, wiping her eyes. "Yes, Maestro." Richard turned to go. "I'll see you tomorrow then," he said. "The boys are excited to finally watch you perform." "They're coming?" she asked, her face lighting up. "Of course," he smiled. "We wouldn't miss it." The next evening, the concert hall was packed. Dozens of people filled the seats, and among them sat Ethan and Evan. Dressed neatly in little suits, their eyes shone with excitement. Richard sat behind them, quiet but proud. When Lena walked on stage, the lights dimmed, and silence filled the room. She took a deep breath and looked out into the crowd. Her heart skipped when she saw the familiar faces smiling back at her. Then she began to play. The first notes of "Goodbye for Now" floated through the air. Soft and full of emotion, the melody told her story. The pain of losing everything. The courage to start again. The love that bloomed in unexpected places. Every note was a piece of her heart, and the audience felt it. Tears filled Richard's eyes as he watched her. For years, music in his home had been a memory of loss, but now it felt like a promise of new beginnings. Ethan and Evan leaned forward, whispering to each other. "That's our Lena." When the final chord faded, the hall erupted into applause. The sound was thunderous, but all Lena could see were the twins standing on their chairs, clapping and cheering. "Bravo, Lena!" they shouted. She laughed through her tears, bowing deeply. After the show, backstage was filled with congratulations. Flowers, handshakes, and smiles surrounded her. But when Richard and the twins came through the door, everything else faded away. Evan ran straight into her arms. "You did it," he said. "We told everyone that was our Lena." Ethan said proudly. Richard stood behind them, holding a bouquet of white lilies. "These were my wife's favorite," he said softly. "She would have loved your music." Lena took them gently, her voice trembling. "Thank you, sir." He looked at her for a moment before speaking. "You don't have to call me sir anymore," he said quietly. "You've more than earned your name back, Lena." "The pianist," the twins laughed. "Lena, the famous pianist," they shouted together. That night, as they all walked out of the hall together, the moon shone high above. The air was cool, the city lights twinkled, and the sound of laughter followed them down the steps. Lena looked at Richard and smiled. "You know, I never thought a single song could change a life." "It changed more than one," he said gently. Looking at her with warmth, the twins ran ahead holding hands, their laughter echoing through the night. Richard and Lena walked behind them, not speaking, just sharing the quiet. And in that moment, it didn't matter who she had been, a maid, a dreamer, or a musician. What mattered was what she had become. The melody that once filled a lonely mansion had now become the sound of a new beginning. Not just for Lena, but for everyone her music had touched. And as she looked up at the stars, she whispered softly to herself, "This isn't goodbye anymore. It's just the start of forever."